In 1940, the US Army called for the development of a helmet that would meet demands of modern warfare. Besides improved ballistic qualities and protective requirements, the new helmet was designed to have two separate parts, a steel shell and a liner. The reason for this was the versatility of both parts. The steel shell without the liner could be used as a bucket, water basin or shovel, and in dozens of other ways. It was also found that in combat a steel shell without rivets was a safer helmet for a soldier to wear. On impact, rivets would be driven into the wearer's head. The liner could be worn as a safety hat behind the front lines and as a garrison cap. It was also suitable for the tropics and in combination with a specially designed knit cap or Arctic conditions. The steel shell and liner together weighed about 3 pounds. The liner alone weighed about 10 ounces. The helmet was also to withstand penetrations of a .45 bullet fired at a 5-foot range. The liner alone was also able to take a direct hit without splintering. The complete M1 helmet, as issued to every soldier of the US Army, consisted of a steel body, a liner with chin strap, and a headband and neckband. The McCord Radiator Manufacturing Company had been the manufacturer of the M1917 helmet of the pre-war years. In 1941, McCord started working on the production of the new steel shell with some assurance that the company would receive orders for both the steel shell and liner. Dies to make the steel shell had been under construction since February. The basic model of the new M1 helmet was a model 1917 helmet with added steel on the sides and back for additional protection. On April the 20th, 1941, it was arranged that with McCord to produce 100 test helmets, the TS-3. The production of the model 1917 helmet was discontinued in early May 1941. The first 962,000 complete M1 helmets were purchased by the Army on the 16th of May 1941. The McCord Company received the contract officially on June the 26th. The pot-shaped steel shell was drawn out of a 16.5-inch circular piece of non-magnetic Hadfield manganese steel. A stainless steel rim and chin strap loops were welded to the shell, after which it was coated with a dual olive drab green on the inside and outside. The paint of the outside was mixed with cork particles, which gave the steel shell a coarse appearance. The price for an M1 steel shell initially averaged 90 cents. In the quartermaster's supply catalogue, the steel shell was referred to as Body Helmet Steel M1 with a stock number 74-H-115. During early December 1942, the Army requested McCord to double the production of steel shells. For this increase, the McCord installed equipment in the factory space that had been used for the work on liners. On June 6, 1942, the Schlueter Manufacturing Company was contracted as a second manufacturer of M1 steel shells. Due to the manufacturing problems, Schlueter didn't produce any steel shells before 1943. The first 37,000 Schlueter steel shells were shipped during January 1943. Although McCord and Schlueter shells are basically identical, a number of differences can be observed. The contour of the Schlueter shells is slightly smaller, creating a less ideal fit for the standard size liner. The flare of the Schlueter steel shells is a bit flatter and wider than McCord, although the curve in the rim at the sides of the Schlueter shell is less prominent. The spot welds to attach the rim are round, whereas McCord shells are oval. The chin strap loops on Schlueter shells have somewhat rounded shaped corners, with the ends bent slightly outwards. The chin strap loops on McCord shells have square shaped corners. The steel sheet lot number under the visor of the Schlueter shell has a larger figure plus an S towards the rim. Some Schlueter shells have the steel sheet lot number above a chin strap loop, others have no stamp at all. McCord steel shells are stamped under the visor with some variation in placement. The texture of the finish on Schlueter shells appear to be somewhat coarser. Black painted steel hardware appears not to be used on the chin straps of Schlueter steel shells. The paint didn't hold well to the stainless steel rim. Even slightly used shells displayed wear to the rim. Well-used helmets usually had a bare rim. This problem caused casualties at the front because the telltale signs of a shiny metal rim on a helmet would easily be spotted by the enemy. By November 1943, the stationary chin strap loop design of the steel shell was dropped in favour for the hinge loop variant, by collectors commonly referred to as swivel bail. It is often stated that the hinge chin strap loop was designed to substitute the stationary chin strap loop because these broke from the steel shell easily. Battlefield found helmets, however, don't seem to support that theory. It seems more likely the hinge chin strap loop was easier to be spot welded to the steel shell, although there is discussion when the hinge loop shell actually reached the front line. There seems to be no convincing photographic evidence showing the use of this type of helmet on D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, although some swivel bow steel shells probably arrived shortly after D-Day. It is generally accepted they did not reach the front line in quantities before fall 1944. The cast buckle, end keep and J-hook of the pre-war model 1917 A1 helmet were used on early production M1 helmets. These were installed on the chin straps of the McCord steel shells exclusively. It had a slightly tilted tip and a raised bar through which the long chin strap passed. The surface of the cast buckle was somewhat rough. The colour varied from bronze to brass. The cast buckle of the model 1917 A1 helmet was superseded by the slightly altered brass buckle that was mechanically stamped. The dimensions of the buckle did not change, but the shape became more flat and square, although the two ridges for the chin strap became more squared off and prominent. The surface of this buckle was smooth and it was coated to prevent corrosion. When brass became a critical material, production of the buckle, end kip and J-hook changed to steel, which was coated black. The steel raised bar steel buckles were made in a very limited quantity before the design of the buckle was simplified. This buckle was used on McCord steel shells exclusively. Production circa 1943, the steel buckles suffered more from corrosion than brass buckles. With the new simplified design of the buckle, the raised bar were dropped. The flat appearance of the black coated steel buckles was enhanced by a more squared off shape and increased dimension. The tip remained tilted. Many mid-war steel shells were outfitted with this type of buckle, which was introduced circa 1943. This buckle was used on McCord steel shells exclusively. At the later stage of the war, brass was no longer considered a critical material. Production of the flat type buckle was changed to brass. The design was identical to the flat steel buckle. The flat brass buckle was introduced shortly before the changeover to the swivel bale steel shell, late 1943. This type of buckle was used on many Schlueter steel shells. The J-hook was made in two variants. The early production type had a sharp pointed end. The later production type had longer ends which were cut flat. It appears this version came into production in 1943, around the time the black coated steel was introduced for the hardware of the chin straps. The raised bar buckles were commonly paired with the sharp pointed J-hook variant. Most flat buckles were combined with the flat cut J-hook variant. Some steel shells featured a mix of variants. Brass and steel parts were also combined. All brass parts of the chin strap received a protective grey/black coating. The steel parts were painted black. This coating usually has worn away to a degree. With the production of the new M1 steel shell already in preparation, a liner had to be developed fast. Experiments with plastic injection moulding by the McCord radiator manufacturing company had not been satisfactory because the liner became too heavy. The suspension used in these experimental liners, however, was accepted and details of the headband and chin strap were worked out. McCord contracted Howley Productions Company, the manufacturer of tropical helmets, to produce a suitable liner for the new M1 steel shell. Howley, in collaboration with McCord, developed a liner which resulted in the approval of the fibre liner on April 28, 1941. Suspension, as initially used in the original liner design for the M1 helmet, copied from the Riddle football helmet. It was made out of silvery white rayon webbing. The rayon head suspension was held by rectangular washers which were riveted to the inside of the liner at 6 points. The neck suspension was held by 3 rectangular washers. The headband, of the same rayon material, partially covered with leather, was attached to the suspension by 6 pairs of snap fasteners. 2 other pairs of snap fasteners took the rayon headband. A leather chin strap with slide buckle riveted to the inner side completed the liner. With the production, the rayon headband was not adjustable, which was why it came in 13 sizes. The sizes were based on the US Army size tariff system. The number of specific sizes needed for an average group of soldiers. A section of about 8 inches of headband was covered with smooth tanned cast leather. The wearer's forehead was to rest against this part. The leather was folded back over the edge of the headband for about 1/4 of an inch. A size mark in black ink was stamped on the rayon headband. The size and style of the numbers varied. The stamp was often worn off. The rayon neckband came in 3 sizes. The size indicated 3 4 or 5 of stamps on the side that rested against the wearer's head. Because of this marking was worn off easily, the 4 nickel coated brass or black oxidized brass mouth snap fasteners were United car marked. The rectangular washers initially used with the rain suspension liners were made of aluminium or brass. To attach these to the liners, aluminium and brass rivets were used. When aluminium and brass became critical materials, they were gradually omitted from line of production. Steel washers and rivets came into use. The rivets used to assemble the detachable chin strap were made of coated steel or black oxidized coated brass. Steel rivets came in brown, grey and green coatings. Many rivets were United car marked on the reverse. A garter stud to accept a triangle-shaped chin-strap holder was riveted to each side of the liner. The garter stud and chin-strap holder were developed by the United Car Fastener Company. The caps of the rivets used for the garter studs were larger than the heads of the rivets used to attach the suspension. Both the caps and garter studs were made of zinc-coated steel or black oxidized brass. Materials were combined on liners. The garter studs had a round or dimpled dome. Steel and brass rounded dome garter studs were used on all types of liners throughout World War II. The dimpled dome garter stud was less common and not often used on early production liners. The insignia eyelet on the front of the liner was first introduced on St. Clair liners and high-pressure plastic liners, spring 1942. Fibre liners did not have an eyelet. The eyelet was intended to accept a rank, device or unit insignia with a screw. Many high-pressure plastic liners feature one or more tiny moulded ribs in the centre, front or back. The ribs can be found on the interior and exterior. They vary in length but are positioned at the edge of the liner. These moulded ribs seem to be leftovers of the markings on the inner and outer steel moulds that were used to shape and press the liners. A chin strap holder was riveted to each side of the liner. Chin strap holders initially used with the rain suspension liners were made of brass. The rivets to attach the chin strap holders were made of brass or aluminium. These rivets were similar to the rivets used to attach the rectangular washers. The chin strap was used on early production liners with a rain suspension that was about 20 inches long and a half-inch wide. Creases ran along the edge of the upper side. One end of the chin strap was attached to the chin strap holder. The other end was attached to a tiny square slide buckle. The chin strap was fed through the buckle, forming a loop, which passed through the chin strap holder to the other side of the liner. The tiny square slide buckles used on chin straps of liners with rain suspension were initially made of black, oxidized brass. When brass became a critical material, it was gradually omitted from the fabrication of square slide buckles. Electro-zinc coated steel chin strap buckles came into use. The detachable chin strap of the new top liner was a piece of tanned cast leather of about 20 inches long and about half-inch wide. Creases ran along the edge of the smooth side. The reverse side of the chin strap was rough. One end of the chin strap was riveted around a triangle-shaped chin strap holder, while the other end was riveted to an adjustable wedge buckle. The chin strap was fed through the buckle, forming a loop which held a second triangle-shaped chin strap holder. The chin strap holders were to be clicked to the garter stud on the inner side of the liner. The buckle and chin strap holders were made of green-coated steel. Black oxidized brass was introduced for these parts around mid-1944. The first type detachable leather chin strap featured a green-coated steel wedge buckle, which was designed by the Shaw Manufacturing Company. The wedge had a sharp, folded, straight edge. The lever was flat with a slightly curved tip end. The buckle came with a small size lever or large size. In general, straight edge buckles were used on only production liners with zinc-coated steel A-washers. With the final design of the wedge buckle, the straight edge was dropped in favour of a rounded roller edge. The lever got a more curved tip, the buckle frame got higher size to support the roller, and the slit was added to the buckle base. These improvements made adjustment to the buckle easier and allow a somewhat thicker leather chin strap. The triangle-shaped chin strap holder was made of green-coated steel wire. The early design of the chin strap holder had the end simply joining at the base of the triangle. Shortly after the initial production, a small tube-like piece of steel is put over the joining ends as a reinforcing measure. The triangular-shaped steel washer was used to rivet suspension to the interior of the liner. Was developed by Westinghouse during 1942 because the A-washers were already used in liners that featured rain suspension around mid-1942. The first type A-washer were made of steel and were electro-zinc coated. The zinc coating was a measure against abrasion and corrosion and was to provide the required correct colour. Steel rivets were commonly used with zinc-coated steel A-washers. Green-coated steel A-washers substituted zinc-coated ones. The green-coated was baked on zinc-coated steel A-washers. Steel rivets were commonly used with green-coated steel A-washers. When brass was no longer considered a scarce material, black oxidized brass A-washers substituted green-coated. Steel rivets were initially used with brass. These were later replaced by brass. The new cotton headband was designed by the Scholl Manufacturing Company during early 1942. It featured tanned cast leather over the entire length, a steel bar buckle to adjust the circumference, and 6 steel spring clips to secure the headband to suspension. Army specifications dictated that all headbands had to be well marked with the manufacturer's initials or name and the contract number. Most markings were stamped with black ink. The initial design of the new cotton headband featured a green-coated steel bar buckle. This was constructed of 2 pieces of steel wire which were crimped together with a steel tube on one side. Shortly after the introduction of the new headband, simplified bar buckle was adopted. It was a one-piece flat steel slide buckle with 2 slits and a raised middle section. The new cotton neckband was similar to the Rain predecessor. It was a strip of HBT with crimped ends and a pair of male snap fasteners on each end. The neckbands came in 3 sizes, 1, 3 and 5. Neckbands were all marked on the reverse with an ink stamp displaying the manufacturer's name or initials, contract number and size. By 1944, all neckbands were outfitted with black oxidized brass snap fasteners. The addition of specification number and the year of manufacture on neckbands were also introduced in 1944. The final version of the neckband was the adjustable type introduced by the end of 1944. It had a bar buckle similar to the one found on the headband to adjust the size. The buckle and the 4 snap fasteners were made of black oxidized brass. Adjustable neckbands were all marked. Some were marked 1944, most were marked 1945. The Southern manufacturers of high-pressure plastic liners are the Mine Safety Appliance Company, Inland Manufacturing Division, Westinghouse Electrics and Manufacturing Company, K-Pack Manufacturing Company, International Molded Plastics Incorporated, Seaman Paper Company, Firestone Tyre and Rubber Company. The initial low-pressure process was deemed unacceptable by the Army, but accepted out of need. These liners were made by St. Clair Manufacturing and Hood Rubber Company. The two paper fibre liner manufacturers are Howley and General Fibre Co. Howley subcontracted General Fibre Co. to make liners and stamped their G in the crown.